Conversations with Friends,
Mm.
the Sally Rooney novel that's been adapted by Hulu again after Normal People. Which check out a review on Normal People. Search Normal People Nostalgia Pod. Um, yeah, Normal People was just it was a moment, a pandemic moment. People just found it and loved it, and it's kind of amazing to think about. I mean, where does it sit in your mind now that we're like a few
Mm.
years removed from it?
Right. I love Normal People, the series. I have not read the Sally Rooney novel. I haven't read Conversations with Friends or her third novel that came out last year. Conversation with Friends, notably the debut Rooney novel, Normal People, the debut Rooney adaptation. I thought that Normal People was fantastic. I think it was my number 4 show of 2020. Absolutely loved it. I think obviously a huge part of it is that Paul Mescal and Daisy Edgar Jones, two star-making performances, just blow up your screen chemistry between them. But the show, with Lenny Aberson's direction and Alice Birch's writing, who are back again for Conversation with Friends, they brought, I think, a real intentional approach to the intimacy of Connell and Marianne in Normal People
Hmm.
that was really mind blowing. And on top of that, sex scenes between two really hot people were also really good while still being very tasteless. So something for everyone in that regards. I think Normal People in hindsight makes a lot of sense as that first adaptation, even though it's the second book, because Normal People is a bit more traditional. It's a love story between two people, and we get to see both of their point of views. Conversation with Friends is a bit messier because we really only have one point of view, but it's about this complicated web of relationships between 4 people. So a bit more challenging to have all those things be more harmonious than Normal People, which I think was a bit more straightforward to tell us a story.
Yeah, when I think about normal people, I think about just the electricity and the chemistry between Paul Mescal and Daisy Edgar Jones, and it's just like, that unfairly, I think Conversations with Friends is going to be compared to this, and it's like,
Yeah.
oh, how are you going to replicate that once in a lifetime chemistry between these two unknown leads? It didn't happen, and I think for that, this series left me just not as engaged as I was with Normal People. I still think there's some good performances, but it really unfairly in my mind I'm like, oh well, this isn't that, or it's not, not
Hmm.
not that moment for Normal People, and I think there's still some good storytelling here, but
Yeah.
it just wasn't Normal People, and that it's a hard perspective, I think, to like put it up against it.
Yeah, I mean, this is on BBC across the pond, but here in the States, it's on Hulu, and I keep seeing Hulu ads for an upcoming film. Was it where the Crawdads Sing, starring Daisy Edgar Jones? I keep getting reminded of her because she's obviously blowing up right now, having a huge year with that and Under the Banner of Heaven and Fresh, obviously, and more to come, surely. But yeah, I keep being like, wow, you know what, Joe Alwyn, you're not as fun to look at as Paul Mescal, you know.
Still incredibly handsome. I
He
mean,
is, yeah.
just like
And,
crazy.
and
Like,
then Allison Oliver in her first role as Frances. It's like, well, I see some similarities to Marianne. Sure, perhaps that's just the way Sally Rooney writes her characters. Again, I don't know. I haven't read the books, but yeah, I couldn't help but think about things I liked about Normal People while watching Conversation with Friends. And it isn't fair when you should try and approach this in a vacuum. However, anyone who's read the books was also doing this when they watched Normal People because they had both books in their mind. And as far as I know, the Conversation with Friend book is more highly regarded than the Normal People book. However, I think it's pretty obvious that the Normal People series will be more highly regarded than the Conversation with Friends series. And that's okay. I don't think Conversation with Friends the series is bad by any means. I still think there's a lot to like about it. It just doesn't rise up and transcend so much the way Normal People the series did.
so why don't we start with that, because I feel like we have kind of started this review off on a negative foot. What were the aspects of season one of Conversations with Friends that you liked?
Yeah, well, I think again, like it's very smart that they have the same creative team around Sally Rooney adapting and creating this with Abramson and Birch. It still looks awesome, you know, when they go to Croatia, when they're in Ireland, whatever it is. Uh, I really like it, and I think it all makes sense. It feels very real, you know, and I think that's good. It's also, I think, kind of cool that they have, because we have four characters. We don't have four unknowns here. We actually have two knowns. We have Joe Alwyn and Jemima Kirk, who are. I think I'm more exposed to Jemima Kirk, to be honest. But Joe Alwyn, in smaller roles, I have enjoyed. Things like The Favorite come to mind. They're both good performers, and I don't. Kirk is given less to do than I expected when I started watching the series, but I
Hmm.
still think they do really well. And Sasha Lane really grew on me as Bobby, someone who I think I'd only seen, I guess, in small role in Loki, but I thought
Yeah.
she was quite engaging as well. And Alison Oliver as Frances also grew on me. The thing that I think the series is just, it didn't grab me in the beginning as much, but once I was a bit closer to the story and had been in it for a few hours, I think that's where I started to like it a bit more, even if I have some quibbles to pick about stuff with the plot. But yeah, I think overall
Mm.
it looks really nice. Performances are good. It's just, I think, the key, like, narrative tension that just doesn't lend itself as well to making a series is all.
Yeah, I think as you kind of pointed out, the series does get stronger as it goes on, and I think that's partially a uh, mechanic of the script and the plot development. I mean, just inherently, you have a main character who is very guarded, very within herself, very emotionally like immature, and so as she's grappling with these things going on, she's not telling you so much about like how she's feeling, even as her relationship, even as Francis's relationship with Nick begins to grow. A lot of their conversations are very like they're very quiet. I mean, people are whispering all over the show. I could have used a little bit
Yeah,
louder. Just talk a little bit louder for me. But
two
they
introverts, man.
they are yeah, they are both introverts who are just not able to really express themselves. And so while you definitely can take away some things from their physical performance, I think it just makes it hard to totally like sit with these characters.
Right.
I think about why Jemima Kirk and Sasha Lane probably jumped off to me so much. They're much more expressive
Mhm.
throughout the show when you do get time with them, and that's communicating something more to me than a lot of the interactions we get with Nick and Francis. But near the end, like the conversation they have in the bar about Nick's mental health issues the year before Francis meets him, I thought Alwyn gives a really awesome monologue there. I thought both him and
Mhm.
Oliver were really strong in that scene. And a lot of these scenes near the end where they're being more expressive with their emotions, I just found to be so much more enjoyable and captivating. And
Yeah.
I hope if there's a season two, we get a lot more of that than like these like toned down whispers in a room and than a sex scene. Because while the sex scenes, sure, great, it's like nice to see beautiful people like being with each other. Like it really wasn't adding much to me for me by like
Right.
the end of the season. So
Yeah, totally. I think these sex scenes are still intimate, but they're not quite as explicit as the ones in normal people. Still
mhm.
natural though, it's not like you're watching porn. I think that's very admirable that it's like portrays like accurate sex scenes on the screen. It's good. Um, yeah, I think that's the thing with me. It's like a lot of these, like I feel like Nick and Francis, especially in the beginning, like they're not like super fun to be with, or the
Yeah,
most likable characters I've ever seen. It's like, I think a big part of this too is like, it's not just like star-crossed lovers like normal people, which is much easier to wrap your head around and get invested in. In Conversation with Friends, we're talking about like infidelity. It's a
yeah,
it's a lot grayer, and I think when Frances is like getting her heart broken by Nick's unwillingness to communicate how he feels about her, or whether he's going to commit or not, and like she's just can't get over it. And like finally, Bobby basically like says it. It's like, like you're the mistress, or like he's
yeah.
cheating on his wife with you. Like, grow up a little bit. Like, this is not supposed to fuck you up like this. you know?
Mhm.
And I think that that was a bit of a sticking point with me a little bit, where it's like, it's like I'm just not invested as much as like this conflict for you because like like it's infidelity, and like Bobby actually says it. Don't be moralistic about this. It's his job to worry about his own marriage, which is fine. It's right, but like I just couldn't help but like be super just a little frustrated, I guess, with like the fact that this is also a very introverted, quiet character who can't express herself. And it's like, okay, well, like have a little ownership of where you're at in this life. I think
Mhm.
for what I understand, the book does a better job of explaining her thoughts on money, and like they kind of reference the fact that she's a communist in the first episode. They never really touch it again in the series. I think that's a bit more explained to the reader in the book, from what I understand. But like they're just, I think, a bunch of ticks with like the Francis character, where it's like I just want you to get the shit together a little bit better is all. And
Mhm.
I think for some people they probably really like seeing a character like this, but for me it was a bit frustrating as well.
Yeah, the conversation with a friend, not really a friend at this point, that really I think hit home for me was when Francis in the last episode calls Jemima Kirk, calls Melissa to like ask her why she shared the story she wrote about her breakup with Bobby that's being published, and caused Bobby to you know unfriend her, defriend her, however you want to put it. And Jemima Kirk delivers, I think, probably what I was like screaming in my head the whole time, like, your actions have consequences. Like, you are responsible for the choices that you make. And I think that that's such a fair criticism, as and I was so fascinated. I wish we saw more of what was going on with Nick and Melissa as they navigated this third party into their relationship. And obviously it's not the first time something like that happened. They reference Melissa's infidelities quite a few times in the season. But I find that so fascinating to like see how they communicate and come to an agreement and understanding of how this third person is going to kind of uh, interact within their marriage. And I think the criticisms that Bobby has of Frances, of her being, self-centered, of her feeling like other people's feelings aren't real all the time, really is like a point that stuck out to me, because it feels like she's just kind of like, oh, I have this boyfriend who has this other person who he's married to, and she just didn't like expect them to be fucking, didn't expect them to be having like intimate moments. It was like kind
Yeah.
of bizarre at times, and I think highlights the character as someone who is flawed, and that's important. I think if she was a perfect protagonist, this wouldn't be interesting at all. But definitely did not find it as fun of a hang to be watching this affair. Although I do think they do a pretty good job of
Mm,
coloring in the gray areas of like why Melissa may be okay with this going on, or why
right.
like they might negotiate that in the relationship.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like I don't have a whole lot more to say. I think part of it's just the challenge of adaptation sometimes, but also just I think because it's a more complicated scenario, it's just harder to figure out where you as a viewer lie. Like I said, normal people much more straightforward, which is not a bad thing
Mhm.
at all. I think if anything, it just helps you get invested faster. So I'm still happy I watched the series, and I wouldn't be surprised that if Sally Rooney's third novel that came out last fall eventually gets adapted as well. There hasn't been any news on that at this point. You mentioned a season two. I mean, as far as I know, this was a full adaptation of the novel. So
Mhm.
if we were to get a season two, it would have to be like a Big Little Lies season two kind of thing, where the author helps adapt a new season of a series, even though the book has already been wrapped up. So interesting thought. I wonder if Hulu and BBC are interested in going that way. Um, but I think I'd probably be more interested in just seeing that third book, seeing what's up with that, because I'm probably not going to read the book, so I'll just wait for the show.
Yeah, I would like a. I think I would like a second season just to see like how things play out between Nick and Bobby, as it seems like Francis is like pitting them against each other to fight. But even as I'm saying it, I'm like almost exhausted by it. So maybe not. Maybe just go on to the third book. um,
Yeah.
anyways, conversation with friends. Check it out. Let us know what you think in the comments below.